We are anonymous. We do not serve kings. We do not worship false idols. And we do not look away when corruption tries to hide behind chaos. Tonight, we uncover the night when Donald Trump's desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative backfired, when the American government's shutdown became a smokescreen for deeper crimes, and when even his own allies began to see the walls closing in. This is not just about a vote. This is about a betrayal and a cover-up decades in the making. It began with the collapse of leadership inside the Democratic Party. 8 Democrats, just 8 voted with Republicans to end the shutdown without securing protections for health care, democracy, or transparency. They called it a compromise, but in truth it was surrender. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, allowed the party to fracture under the weight of corporate influence and fear of losing their seats. Senator Chris Murphy's exhausted voice echoed the frustration of millions. He said Americans didn't want Democrats who yield, they wanted Democrats who fight. But the fighters were silenced. Donald Trump saw the opening and seized it. He believed that if the government reopened on his terms, he could claim victory. He thought pain for the people meant profit for his billionaires, and that chaos in Washington meant cover for himself. But what he didn't count on was how fast that chaos would turn against him. Because this shutdown wasn't just political, it was personal. It was about the Epstein files. For months, documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein's network records of his flight's finances and high-profile associates had been stalled by procedural gridlock. Every time a deadline approached, the Trump-aligned House delayed. Every time transparency loomed, a distraction appeared. And just as the shutdown ended, those files were suddenly back on the table. Trump's nightmare had returned. Behind the scenes, journalists and investigators confirmed that the House would reconvene within 36 hours of the Senate vote. That meant one thing: the Epstein records could be formally reintroduced. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, could no longer hide behind excuses. There were enough signatures, 218, to bring the motion to the floor. And Trump knew that once those files were unsealed, names would fall, reputations would burn, and alliances would fracture. So in the middle of the night, Trump did what he always does when cornered. He tried to rewrite reality. He issued sweeping pardons, 77 in total, covering his most loyal foot soldiers: Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesebro, Sidney Powell, Boris Epstein, all men and women tied to the 2020 fake elector scheme that helped fuel the January 6th insurrection. None of them had been formally charged yet, but Trump didn't care. These weren't pardons of justice. They were preemptive shields bribes in political form. The Justice Department's pardon attorney, Ed Martin, posted the list online, undated, vague, and riddled with contradictions. The White House refused to comment. The language of the document was chillingly specific. It did not apply to Trump himself. In other words, he was insulating his network, not the nation. The symbolism was unmistakable. Trump was building a wall not along the border, but around himself. A wall of loyalty, silence, and fear. Every pardon was a payoff. Every name on that list was a co-conspirator, a potential witness turned loyalist. Legal analysts quickly noted the danger. These pardons wouldn't hold up in state cases since New York, Georgia, and Michigan still have open investigations into the fake elector plots. But the gesture mattered. It told the world that Trump was willing to use every ounce of power left in his hands to protect himself, even if it meant burning the system down in the process. And while he played kingmaker with pardons, millions of Americans were still suffering from the aftermath of the shutdown. Healthcare premiums were spiking. Families were rationing medicine and skipping doctor visits. Federal workers were still waiting for back pay. Senator Bernie Sanders warned that 15 million Americans were at risk of losing Medicaid or ACA coverage. 50,000 people could die unnecessarily every year. These are not statistics. They are human lives erased by political games. Sanders' words were raw. Does anybody in the world think that makes sense? 15 million people losing health care, 50,000 dead every year. This is what they voted for tonight. His fury wasn't directed only at Republicans, but at his own party. Because when Democrats yield to bullies, democracy bleeds. Meanwhile, Trump's motives were clearer than ever. Every scandal in his orbit, from the election lies to the Epstein connections, fed into one narrative controlled through chaos. He thrives on confusion because it keeps the spotlight shifting, the headlines tangled, and the truth delayed. But this time his timing betrayed him. Even conservative networks began to question the pardons. Why now? Why in secret? Why release them at midnight after the government reopened? Because the Epstein files were about to resurface. Investigators close to the case confirmed that whistleblowers had provided new leads linking Trump's inner circle to the same offshore accounts that funded Epstein's operations. If those leads proved true, it would explain the panic. The Epstein scandal has always been more than a story about a predator. It is a story about access, leverage, and power. It's about how billionaires, politicians, and intelligence operatives used a trafficking network to entrap each other. Names like Trump, Prince Andrew, Bill Barr, Alan Dershowitz, and others have all hovered near the flames. And now, as sealed files prepare to go public, Trump's legal and political strategy has shifted from defense to diversion. His pardon spree isn't just about shielding allies. It's about signaling to potential whistleblowers, stay quiet, stay loyal, or be destroyed. But here's what Trump doesn't understand. The internet remembers. Data cannot be silenced forever. And even as he hides behind loyalists, the pressure builds. Every pardon only draws more attention. Every delay only fuels suspicion. Meanwhile, the public's patience with political theater is collapsing. People are tired of being pawns. They watched the shutdown drag for 40 days while their bills piled up, only to see it end in betrayal. They saw Schumer's quiet maneuver, letting retiring senators vote yes while pretending to oppose the bill himself. They saw the Democratic brand sink deeper into confusion, and they saw Trump use the chaos to quietly rewrite history in his favor. But history won't be kind to any of them, because leadership is measured not in headlines but in consequences. And the consequences are staggering: families losing health care, children going hungry, veterans locked out of benefits, federal workers going unpaid, all while billionaires receive tax breaks and indicted loyalists walk free. That's not leadership. That's organized cruelty. And the most dangerous part, Trump's new playbook is working. His pardons act as a loyalty test. His media surrogates amplify conspiracy theories to drown out the Epstein story. His followers interpret every investigation as proof of persecution. The line between cult and campaign has dissolved. But in that chaos, truth is still bleeding through. Whistleblowers are talking. Journalists are digging. Former insiders are flipping. Reports have emerged that several former aides previously silenced by non-disclosure agreements are cooperating with federal investigators about Trump's late-night communications with Epstein's associates in 2016 and 2017. There are logs, transcripts, and encrypted messages that could finally connect the dots. And now, as the House reconvenes, the countdown begins again. If the discharge petition on the Epstein files succeeds, the documents will become public record. The same files Trump spent years trying to suppress could now become his undoing. Even within his party, cracks are showing. Some Republican strategists quietly admit that Trump's actions are no longer about policy or even re-election. They're about survival. Every pardon, every shutdown, every press stunt is a lifeline thrown to himself. They whisper that he's trapped by his own fear of prosecution, of exposure, of irrelevance. But Trump's danger is that he drags everyone else down with him. As long as his movement feeds on rage and disinformation, as long as the truth is treated like treason, the system remains hostage. Still, there's something happening beyond Washington, something Trump can't control. Ordinary people are connecting the dots. Workers, nurses, students, veterans, they're realizing that the same politicians cutting their benefits are the ones shielding predators. They're realizing that law and order means nothing when the law is bent for the powerful. They're realizing that truth only survives when people refuse to be silent. And that's where this story turns. Because it's not just about what Trump did last night. It's about what comes next. Will America keep allowing leaders to sell justice for convenience? Or will people finally demand accountability, even from those they once worshipped? Make no mistake, this is the reckoning. Chuck Schumer's failure of leadership will be studied for years, not as a tactical mistake, but as a moral one. Chris Murphy's exhaustion will echo as a warning. You cannot negotiate with corruption. Bernie Sanders' outrage will remind us what it means to fight for the people, not for power. And Trump's desperate midnight pardons, his last-ditch attempt to silence the coming storm, will be remembered as the moment his illusion of control shattered. Because the truth always finds its way to light. So here's what we say to those watching tonight: stay awake, stay informed. The storm that Trump tried to contain has already begun. The Epstein files will not stay buried. The crimes that hide behind politics will not remain hidden forever. If you are watching this, you are part of that awakening. Hit like, subscribe, share this message before it disappears. Because the more people who know the truth, the harder it is to erase. We are anonymous. We do not serve kings. We do not kneel before corrupt power. We serve truth. And truth has no party, no flag, and no fear. Remember this night, the night of betrayal, the night of pardons, the night of exposure. Because when history asks who stood against the darkness, let your answer be clear.